On this episode of Narcissist Apocalypse, we talk with an abuse survivor named Barb, and Barb was married to a critical coercive controller. It's a story of gaslighting, rage, withholding, financial control, isolation, and survival mode. Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, everyone. I am Brandon Chadwick, and with me today we have Barb. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you for asking. And if you want to be a guest like Barb is today, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com, fill out our guest form, and we will go from there. Also at our website, we have a support group with Zoom meetings every Wednesday nights, Thursday afternoons, and Saturday nights. And we have a newsletter at our website where you get a free reflection workbook for every new survivor story. And that is a weekly newsletter, all at narcissistapocalypse.com. And we do have a content warning for this episode as we do discuss physical abuse and sexual coercion, sexual abuse in this episode, as well as there's also channeling of the abuser's voice in this episode. So that is your content warning for today. And today you're going to hear Barb's story. And there's so much that happened in her story that I feel like the earlier description really does not do it justice. I think you'll be hearing so many different tactics in this episode. You'll find validation in so many parts of Barb's story. I think of Barb's story as a whole, looking at her abuser and how they acted. The word that comes to my mind is dehumanization. I think that is the word that describes what is going on the best. So I just want to thank Barb for being here today. And now I'm going to get out of my way and your way. Barb, the floor is now yours.
Thank you. I was raised in a pretty conservative home. We went to church a lot. I had 3 siblings and my parents. We were raised with pretty traditional family values, like the mom would take a backseat role to the dad. The husband would be the one to make the big decisions. The wife would always defer to the husband. I loved growing up in church, but I think that I internalized a lot of those views about what a woman does, what a man does, and the woman always would take a backseat to the man. Like always make sure that my mom would always make sure that my dad approved of decisions, not in a way that I felt he was controlling her, but just that she was deferring to him. And we didn't have a lot of money growing up. My dad had studied a college degree, but he never ended up, doing the job he studied for. So he had a lot of more blue collar type jobs. There was a lot of financial stress in our home. A lot of times I didn't feel the financial stress, but I knew that there was this underlying just tension in the home. If something would break down, there was tension. If there was a problem with the car, a problem with the house, there was always a lot of stress, underlying stress, to where I feel like I grew up kind of cringing for whatever next catastrophe might happen. But I mean, overall, though, I had a good childhood. I had fun with my brothers and my sister. I feel like my mom was very loving. She gave me a lot of attention. Although my father, he was more standoffish. He was more, really focused on the stress of his job. Sometimes he would work at night and we would have to be very quiet in the day. But I do feel like I had a loving home. I enjoyed going to church. I felt safe in that community. I almost felt like I was taught that, maybe I wasn't taught this, but I internalized that people inside my church were safe and maybe people outside were not to be trusted. I did grow up, though, maybe due to my dad always had a hard time showing affection. He wasn't very affectionate. My mom was very affectionate. But I do feel like I grew up feeling like something was wrong with me, maybe because sometimes I had problems fitting in, or sometimes I remember I had these little friends at church and they acted one time like there was something wrong with me and they didn't want to invite me to their home. And there were 4 of us and 3 got invited to this, or 3 went to this one girl's house and I wasn't invited. And so there were little things happening, like little blips with these friends where I would be like, is there something wrong with me? Like, why are they not accepting me? what's going on with this? And then I would get invited to their homes and I would feel okay, but I would always feel like they were talking about me. So that was a moment in my childhood that kind of, I feel like marked me a little bit to feel rejected. And then some things happened too when I was in middle school. I had a bunch of friends that kind of ganged up on me. And there was something inside of me that just said, you're not good enough, or you're not enough, or you're too much. When you're yourself, there's too much noise, there's too much activity, there's too much personality. There was something there that just made me feel like I wasn't quite good enough. I noticed that my mom and dad were having a lot of financial troubles when I got into middle school. And my mom had to go back to work. And I feel like that she resented that. My sister was just starting kindergarten. So my mom went back to work. And I kind of internalized the idea for my mom that she really wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, that was the highest calling a woman could have, that raising your children, loving them, taking care of them, feeding them good food, doing activities. I mean, she was always very hands-on with crafts and reading. We would get books and books from the library, boxes of books from the library every summer. We would each have a box full of books. Like, she really taught us that joy of reading and learning. So I could see that was like where she was the most joyful and happy, was raising us. And when she went back to work, I could tell she was frustrated that she had to do that because of our financial situation. I think it just wasn't working. And so I kind of internalized that as something that I should do when I was a mom. Like, I shouldn't work, I should stay at home, I should be a mom. I feel like I took her desire into myself. And maybe that kind of stunted, in a way, not through any fault of her own, because she didn't even know that I felt this way. But I just saw that as like, maybe I shouldn't work. Maybe I should really just focus on my children. And there were women in the church that kind of had the same idea. I started thinking, okay, someday I'm going to be a mom. I'm going to dedicate myself to just like raising my children, to being a good wife. This is what I want to do. This is the highest calling a woman could have. This was kind of like formulating in my mind. So when I was in high school, I didn't really date that much. I went out with a few different guys, but never. I was also raised like in very strict purity culture, which is that strong religious kind of fundamental idea that you save yourself until marriage and then everything will work out perfectly. But you cannot, like, you can't even hardly kiss each other. You better not, hold hands. You should be very careful. You should save your virginity. And so I grew up with that idea also being internalized, that this is wrong. And as soon as you get married, it's right. And there's a lot of disconnect between those two ideas. And I know people that were raised the way I was or grew up during that time probably can relate to that. So when I graduated from high school, I worked at a summer camp, a Christian camp. I had a boyfriend there. And now looking back, I can see I just wanted to be accepted by him. I would do whatever he wanted me to do. Like, if he told me that I was doing something the wrong way, if I was doing something out of place, I should switch it. I would try to please him a lot, because I know that I had the feeling that I wasn't acceptable in some way, and I had to make myself acceptable. And I so wanted his acceptance of me. I feel like I was chasing that, and it wasn't a good relationship. Now looking back, I can see he yelled at me a lot. He diminished me. He called me names. But during the time that we were together, I just felt that I deserved it. We dated on and off long distance, and I went to college. But I remember my mom kind of forced me to go to college, because I thought, I don't have to go to college. I'm going to be a mom, stay-at-home mom. I didn't really have an aspiration. And she said, look, you either go to school because our insurance is running out, or you get a full-time job. Like, but you have to be a student. And she actually signed me up for college, for community college, and went to the orientation because I was like visiting the boyfriend. And when I got back, I was like, okay, I guess I got to go to college. She kind of made that decision for me. And maybe I eventually would have gone, but it wasn't part of my plan. So I studied a degree. And during that time, I still, in the back of my mind, thought, I'm going to graduate, I'm going to get married, and that's it. This is my life. I'm going to have children. And off and on, I chose to study English because I was good at writing. I loved literature, but I still couldn't really envision myself in any kind of career. So during my college experience, I studied abroad for a summer, and to a country where I was enamored by the language, the culture, And I was like, "Oh, I wanna learn this language. This is exciting." And there was a spark and, of that, "Oh, I can learn this." I started to learn and I got better and I was like, "I can communicate with people. This is fun." And so I was set to graduate and I remember just wondering what I should do, and my mom was talking to me. She said, "Since you studied abroad for a little while, why don't you go back to that country, find a program where you could serve in some way and continue solidifying your knowledge of the language?" And so that's what I did. I looked for like a program online where I would live with a family, where I would continue taking classes, and I would also serve in some sort of church. And so after I graduated from college, I became a missionary basically, where I was in this program for young people. It was like either a year long or a 2 year long program. I was set to go for a year. And I lived with different families in that country, and I was learning the language, and I was just doing whatever the pastor of the church asked us to do. Like if he wanted us to run a youth group meeting, or if he wanted us to go door to door evangelizing people, or pass out food, or lead the singing, or even sometimes preach, depending on the type of church it was. Usually they didn't let women do that. So I had been doing that for about a year and I was happy doing that. So I decided to keep going. I asked the mission that I was with if I could stay for one more year. And by then I was becoming very fluent in the language. So I was allowed to stay another year. And during that time, I was feeling deep loneliness. I was having a hard time because I knew that like I had graduated, I was in this country. We had rules that we couldn't date people there. Like for the first year that we were there, we were not supposed to date because it was a different culture. As Americans, we're different from this culture. Like we were more casual with our relationships, I guess, or more free to date. And there it was like, if you date someone, you're pretty much saying you're going to marry them. So I didn't want to break the rules, but I did feel that kind of loneliness. People would come and go. I didn't have close friends that would, live near me. I had friends, but I had to communicate that with them in a different language. So I couldn't really connect as well as I wanted to. Even though I was becoming very fluent, it's hard to connect to people in a language that's not your first language on a deeper level. So, I mean, but I was doing the work, but I was just kind of getting burned out too. So during that time, I remember going to a Thanksgiving celebration in a city nearby, and a lot of people that had come together from the first year program were just having a great time. I could tell they had good rapport. They were all making their Thanksgiving meal. And I just sat there thinking, I'm so lonely. I wish I had somebody. I wish I had a partner or a boyfriend or somebody. And it was during that time that I just went back home to where I lived. I lived about 2 hours away from where we had that celebration. And I just felt so sad and depressed. And I was like, God, why don't I have anybody? Why don't I have somebody that I can share my life with? Like I've done my degree. I checked that off. I'm ready to start a family. I think I was about 24. I was so young, but I wanted to meet that person, and that's when I met that person. Unfortunately.
So here you meet this person. You yourself are outgoing and I'd say gregarious. And based upon how you were raised, you do have a specific set of values. And these values are kind of, let's just say, subservient values in a lot of ways. And even though you want to be a mom, you want to do all these things, you want this family, there is this power dynamic with this idea of what you want that is skewed a little bit right off the bat. So when you're now going to meet the person that the story is about, who is this abusive person, this person is going to be able to take this already skewed dynamic, and this is how this abuser is going to manipulate that. This puts you in a situation that will be terrible and abusive for a very long period of time. So I guess from this point on, what happens when you do meet this person? Who are they? And what do you like about them?
So I met him at just like this random meeting. I went somewhere with a friend. He was there. There was kind of like this moment where I saw him, and it was almost like a cartoon where Cupid like strikes you with the arrow, and I was just like, who is that? I don't know what it was. I was just like automatically drawn to him. There was something electric about it. I don't know if it was his gaze. I had like a 3-minute conversation with him. And over the years, we would tell the story like it was love at first sight. And it felt like that. I had never felt like that before. There was something, like I said, electric. And I was like, ooh. And I just thought to myself, something really good is going to happen because I met this person. So then I was asked to find a church to put these two ladies in that needed to like do part of their program, and they wanted a place for them to serve. And the person that told me, I was thinking about these two churches, and I was like, oh, this one, because I knew he was like the interim pastor at that church at the time. So that's how we started talking, because I had to actually go visit his church. I had to say, hey, I work with this mission and they want to bring these girls to work at your church, and would you be open? And that's how we started talking to each other, basically. He at the time ran a business, so he had his own business. He was filling in as a pastor at a church, but he wasn't the main guy. He was just kind of like filling in until they found someone. He had been the leader of the youth group. He was very charismatic, very, when he spoke, I remember going to his church and sitting there and just sitting like amazed at the power of his words, how inspiring they were, how everybody was just kind of wrapped up with him. Just they were in this wave of charisma and moved, and people were, at the end when there's like an altar call, people were so moved and they were going forward, and there was crying, and it was electrical. There was energy happening. And so I just remember thinking, wow, this person, he's got to be a good person. Look at what he's doing. He has his own business. He's like volunteering to do this while they find someone. And so we started meeting up, like we would have coffee and talk about what the logistics of having these people in his church and serving there, what that looked like. But mainly he would just tell me stories about himself. Like I remember sitting for hours listening to him talk about his travels, all the places he had visited, how God was, speaking to him and talking to him about these big ideas and big plans. And he had been recently to another country where he'd gone to like a conference. And he was very motivated to see big changes in his church, in his country. He was like going to lead some sort of revival. I really believed everything he was saying, that he was very sincere, that this was a man of God, this was a man people follow, and I just got swept up in it.
Hi, everyone. If you've been listening to Narcissist Apocalypse for a long time, you probably know I haven't done host read ads in years. And that's because all I really have with you is trust. So as time has gone on, I become more careful about what I bring to the show, especially because survivors deserve care from people who understand trauma and aren't treating it like some side issue. That's why I wanted to tell you about Rebound Therapy. Rebound offers specialized virtual treatment for people ready to work through past trauma and reclaim their lives. What stood out to me is that their therapists are carefully vetted and trained in evidence-based treatment. They pair their clinical expertise with deep support from survivor advocates who have lived experience to support your healing process between sessions. It's covered by many major insurance plans like Aetna, many Blue Cross Blue Shield plans, and more. Head to hellorebound.com/NA to check your insurance or get matched with a therapist. I'll also put the link in the episode description. And what type of background did they come from?
He actually came from, a very poor background, and he told me about his story. His father had died when he was young. He grew up in extreme poverty to where he said, when it rained in his house, it was raining as well. Like the rain was always coming in. Over the years during our marriage, he would always like be so happy when it would rain, because he would say, I cannot, I thank God that I'm not getting wet right now, because for so many years the roof had leaks. He was so poor. He suffered a lot. He suffered abuse from just abusive people around him as he was growing up. He had a very stern uncle, that took the role of his father when his father passed away, who was just really rough with him. He didn't receive a lot of love and care. I think his mom was all but an alcoholic. When his dad died, I think she just got lost there for a while. He's told me stories of how she would go through and pick up scraps on the ground after a street market because they just didn't even have enough to eat. So she would try to like get enough bits and pieces to make a meal, and people would like give her charity or other leftover things so they would eat. I mean, he was very, very, very poor. So he had this story of like, I have pulled myself up. I have built a business. I've gone to college. Against all odds, have conquered this poverty, this hard situation. And there was still a lot of resentment and hurt. I mean, there were times when he would start to tell me something, or we would be driving by like a place and he would say, oh, I just got a bad feeling about that over there. I don't want to talk about it. And I'll be like, wait, maybe you should talk about it so you can feel better, and like go there and see like, what's that trauma back there? But then he would like shut me out and say, I don't want to talk about it. So I don't know what all he went through, but he went through some major tough times as a kid. But we kind of felt like, well, we had both kind of gone through hard times. Maybe my hard times were not that hard, but I had grown up with hand-me-down clothes and the car that had to get pushed down the street to get started. We had similar backgrounds in that we both had understood that we didn't have a lot of money growing up, but he was very, very extreme. But he had a really good relationship with his sister and his sister's family, and they were like this amazing family. They had kids, and I just bonded with them really quickly. They all lived in the same home at the time because his sister and her family were preparing to move to another country. So they were all together. His mom lived there too. And so he would invite me over to have meals as we got to know each other. And I just loved the dynamic of his brother-in-law. It was like the kindest person I had ever met. And I felt excited to be a part of that family. So I was drawn in by his family as much as by, his charisma. And I also felt really empathetic. I felt very compassionate towards him, that he had suffered so much and that he had overcome so much. I dove in head first. I was in love, like right away. And as we started to get to know each other, he invited me to go places almost every day. And as a missionary, like I didn't go out to eat. I didn't spend a lot of money. I had a very fixed income, fixed budget because I subsisted off of, donations. So I wouldn't go out to eat. I wouldn't go to the movies. And he started inviting me to go to the movies. Of course, he would sometimes buy me clothes and then pick out an outfit and say, let's go to this fancy restaurant. And I was there. I was having a great time. I was getting the treatment that I didn't think I probably deserved, but I was really enjoying it. And we would go to the movies a lot. So, but then there were these little things that started happening. I remember he picked me up outside of my church one day and he said, you look mature. And I said, oh, thank you. Because I was early 20s. I was like, oh, I want to look mature. I don't want to look like a kid. He's like, no, you look old. And I was like, he said mature as in old. I'm like, why? Oh, your hairstyle, that makes you look old. Oh, I prefer your hair down. Okay. So I kind of like thought there was a little jab there, but I didn't take it too much hard. I thought, okay, well, I'll take my hair down next time I see him, Another time he took me out to this really fun place and we were dancing and he said, oh, that guy over there is watching you. And I was like, I don't know who you're talking about. He mentioned somebody in that place 5 or 6 times, and I was just watching him. I was just hanging on his every word. And then he would say, haha, he would start laughing. That guy really seems to want to get with you. Like, he is really watching you. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then he said this weird comment. He's like, you would actually be perfect for my brother. That really felt like a punch in the gut because I thought, why would you think that I would even want to meet your brother? Like his brother lived far away. He had told me, he was like in another place and he was in another country. I'm like, why would you say that? So, and he would make little comments like that. One time we were on the phone and before we started like going out a ton, one time on the phone, he said, oh, you'd be perfect for this guy. And I'm like, doesn't he have a girlfriend? And also in my mind, I thought, I don't like that guy. I like you. So I don't know why. I just felt like he would give me these mixed messages. He would make me feel really special, but then all of a sudden he would take it away. So we would go out 4 days in a row. Or we would go out every other day in a week. But we would have gone out like 4 days in a week. And then for the next 3 days, he would kind of ghost me. Or then we would get together like a few days later and he wouldn't like give me a hug or hold my hand or even like put his hand on my shoulder or anything. And I just felt off. I felt like, why is he withdrawing this affection? And I even remember writing it down in my journal, and I wrote down like, this doesn't make sense. It's like he pulls away, then he comes closer, then he pulls away. I don't understand this. And he told me, oh, I was just practicing like, keeping distance, because we have to be careful, because he would always say, once you light that fuse, you can't, like, when you blow it out, like the fuse of sexual attraction, I guess. Once you light it, it goes fast. So you have to blow it out and make sure you're not crossing any boundaries. And of course, I was very true to my convictions, and I wasn't going to cross any sexual boundaries, but like he wouldn't give me a hug, or he wouldn't like sit close to me, and it felt so bad. And at this point, I can tell you I was completely connected to him in that cycle that I didn't even know existed, to where he treated me like a queen, and then he would make a little jab about my appearance, or he would say something. I remember another example, we were on the phone one time, and I was so excited to talk to him on the phone. And I remember I just yawned and I said, oh, sorry, I'm a little bit tired. I didn't sleep that well last night. And he said, then why in the world do you want to talk to me on the phone? Like, go to bed. And it was this coldness that would come out of nowhere. So that's like the little cycle I'm talking about. I would feel like he would treat me so well, but then there would be this little jab, and then he would be cold, and I would want that treatment back so badly. Like, I would just feel like a withdrawal, almost like it was a drug. And I was dying to get that back. So I was hooked. I was in the trauma bond, like from the very start. I didn't even know what that was at the time, but I was in that. Like, my nervous system was going up and down, and I was really needing him to bring me back closer. And this one thing happened, and it was a big thing in our relationship. We had only been dating a couple months, like seriously as boyfriend and girlfriend. I had to get special permission to have a boyfriend, but make sure we were like on the up and up. And I remember he wanted to throw this party for his sister, I believe, or his mom. I think it was for his mom's birthday. And he invited people over, and it was kind of a big deal. And at his house, there was no bathroom on the first floor. There was only a bathroom on the second floor. I started to feel bad at the party, and I went up to the bathroom, and I just felt really weak. I was like splashing water in my face, and all of a sudden I felt so weak. And his bathroom was right beside his bedroom. And I just remember not even feeling like I could go downstairs and tell him I felt bad. I just got in his bed. It was starting to get dark outside, so it was dusk. And he came looking for me, and he found me in my bed, and he reacted not in a way where he was like, oh my gosh, what's the matter? What are you doing here? Are you okay? He said, what are you doing in my bed? Are you crazy? Are you trying to trap me? Are you trying to make me have sex with you? What are you doing in my bed? Like, you are a Jezebel. You are this like fallen woman. You're trying to seduce me. And I was like, literally, I felt so badly. I've never felt that badly before. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I said, I feel so bad. Can you please take me to the doctor? I'm not okay. And he still was super upset at me, but he took me to the doctor. And the whole time he was very cold. He wouldn't really look at me. He was withdrawing the affection again. Like, I was a crazy person that was trying to entrap him. And so after that time, I was supposed to take a trip with friends to another part of the country. It was spring break, and we were going to take a whole week and travel around and go to this really beautiful place with waterfalls and stay with a friend's family. And right before I left, he said, I would like to take this time just not to talk to you at all. I don't think we should talk. I don't know if this is going to work out. Like, you need to just go on your trip. I don't want to talk to you. Do not call me. Stay back. And I just remember that trip, the most beautiful waterfalls and places you can imagine. And the whole trip, I was just devastated. I just felt like I had to do anything to get back on the good terms with him, anything to get back in that relationship with him. And I was crying all the time. I mean, I was making a scene, and my friends were like, you are a drag. Like, why did we bring you? And I remember I couldn't even wait until the end of the trip. I called him, and he said, okay, I'll come and pick you up at where you guys arrive. And then it's kind of like we just fell back into everything normally. And he never apologized for anything. He never recognized that, he was wrong, that the way he treated me was unkind. But I just was so happy to have him back in my life. Like, it was like a flood of emotion that, okay, everything is going to be okay. Like, during the trip, I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. Am I going to go back to my own country? Like, I have no plan. Like, this was my plan. Like, this was my person. I decided this is my person. This is where I'm going to be. And we were back together again, and things just went back to normal. During that time too, I remember he hadn't ever yelled at me before. Like, he did get upset when he found me in his bed, and he did say, like, you're trying to entrap me, but he wasn't like screaming at me. One time we were just going to have dinner with his mom, I think, and on the way there there was a word that I didn't know in that language. And we always communicated in his language, and that was not my first language. And so his English was okay, but the language that we spoke was better. Like, I spoke it better than he spoke English. So I remember we were on the way somewhere to meet up with his mom, and he was like, "Don't you know this word?" He was telling me something about a word that I didn't know. It was a word for garment. I didn't know that word in that language. And so he said it over and over, and he's like, "Don't you know this word? This. And he started yelling that word over and over. I said, "I don't know that word." And I just felt cold. My whole body went cold. Like, this person is screaming at me. Up until then, there were like, these little things were happening, but that he was just flat out yelling in my face. And that really like threw me. But then he acted like nothing happened. Later on, he never apologized. He just acted like, whatever, that happened. I was stressed. Maybe he said, "Oh, sorry, I was stressed." But he wasn't like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I treated you like that." There wasn't acknowledgement of that. So during this time, like, I was getting closer to him, but then my deadline for my second year being over and this mission was coming up, and I really needed to decide what I wanted to do. And we were meeting up and talking about it, and we kind of, I don't know how, this is so weird, we kind of both came to the conclusion that maybe I should go back to the US. I should come back here and like get a job and live independently, because he was like, "I think you're like, used to living with different families, and you haven't ever lived on your own, and maybe that would be good for you to do." And I don't know how he sold it to me as like, "And then we'll come back together maybe, but this is probably the best thing for you." And it wasn't like the breakup. It was more like a smooth transition of, we're going to try this for a while, but we sort of broke up, but we didn't. I don't know. It wasn't like so explosive. And I don't really remember how we came to that decision. But as soon as it was like the summer, I came back to the US, I was really upset. But then a month later, he started calling me again and saying, "How do I know you're not the right person for me? How do I know you're not like the woman for my life?" And I was like, "Yeah, how do you know that I'm not that woman?" But my focus was on being that woman to him. I never asked myself, "How do I know you're the right man for me?" And so with all the things that I had already seen, and all the signs I had, all the red flags that I know I could not see at the time, but were there. Like, you don't see them until you look in the rearview mirror, right? You don't know that's what that is. But even with all of those little things that would make me stressed, or we would still have these conversations with these little jabs he would throw in, I agreed to have a long distance relationship with him. And during that time, I signed a year-long contract with a school, so I couldn't leave until the end of the school year. Well, I could have, but I was like, focused on doing my job. But then also he would call me and try to talk to me till late at night when he knew I would have to get up really early in the morning. And I would say, "I really need rest. Like, I got to go to work tomorrow," because I was teaching. It was really hard. It was the first time I had done that. It was a really hard job. And he would keep me up like really late at night. But little by little, we were like kind of back in the same relationship, just on the phone, long distance. And he came up that Labor Day and he asked me to marry him. And I said yes.
So before we get into the marriage aspect of things, you were supremely love bombed here in a big way. It's not just a love bomb. There's this charisma about him. There's this romanticizing of this family. There's also an empathy for him in regards to how he grew up as well. And this person is very big into this push-pull dynamic And they're in charge of this push-pull. They can push you away when they want. They can pull you back when they want. And they're sprinkling in these little abuse type things that are going on besides the withholding. There are some outbursts that are happening, this nitpicking of language that's going on. This person has become this truth teller in your world as well. So you're listening to them, and they're saying things like, I think you should go back to America for a little bit. And you listened to that. So then you go back. That's the push away. And that push away is on his terms. So then he tries to get you back, which is also on his terms. He becomes a time thief. He's stealing your time. So here, whenever he wants something, he's not doing it in a way where he's saying like, hey, give me this or else. This doesn't seem abusive, but he's pulling things and controlling things that in a manner that he wants. And he has pushed your boundaries in ways already that are pretty subtle, I would say. And really, he's just in complete control here, being able to push, pull, and dictate and point out things to make you start to feel about yourself as well. But because of how subtle it is for you, this person still seems like a rock star, really. So now you're here, and I guess what happens next?
Yeah. Oh, those are such good points. He was slowly eroding my confidence. And and you're right, like I had never realized that he was the one keeping time. He was the one deciding when things were going to happen. And maybe that's why I didn't feel so bad when we quote broke up for me to go back to the US, because he was like, this is going to be good and you need this. And it was almost like he was encouraging me. Oh my gosh, I had never really seen that before until you said that. He wanted to get married right away. He wanted to get married like in the next few months after that. And I remember my mom was like, you signed a contract, like don't like burn bridges. You need to fulfill your contract. You get done in June. You guys cannot get married till June. And I mean, thankfully I listened to my mom. I mean, thankfully, I don't know, I still got married, but sorry, spoiler alert. But yeah, so he would call me constantly and I'd be like, I need 8 hours of sleep. And then he'd write a cute little poem about 8 hours and how his princess needed 8 hours, but he would still call me. And we would talk until late. And it would be like these little conversations that would just, sometimes I would get off the phone and I'd be like, I don't even know why I feel so bad. But that conversation made me feel so bad. Where I would be confused at what we had even talked about. We would get in an argument about where we were going to take our honeymoon or what we wanted to do. And at the end of the day, he just started to kind of make the decisions. But I had to do all the work of planning a wedding in my own country with no support from him. I found the venue. I was doing all the things. And then he was like making his comments to kind of say, well, I didn't really like that, but I didn't want that. Like even the suit that I chose for him, because he would say, do everything, you pick everything. I don't care. I just want to be married. But then when he came to get married, because he came like the week before and he saw the tuxedo I had chosen, he's like, why did you choose that? And I said, because you told me to choose everything. You weren't here. He didn't even give his friends invitations. He didn't even do the work of handing out the invitations I sent him to see if any of his friends could make it. And that was like a rift with some of his friends over time, that they're like, you didn't even invite us to your wedding. And I was like, don't look at me, because that was the one thing he had to do. And just constantly, there was a constant just confusion to my life. I remember I started going to see a counselor during that time because I just felt depressed. And it wasn't my job. My job was exhausting. It was really hard. Being a teacher is very hard, especially in the first year. But it was more the angst. There was a constant angst that I don't think I could put my finger on about, was I really going to do this? Was I really going to like merge my life with this person? Because yes, I wanted to, but like I felt so bad a lot of the time. I was so tired. And I remember a very good friend, she said, you know what, I'll help you send back the invitations if you're doubting. And I said, well, no, but I'm not, but I am. And so there was a moment when maybe I could have like backed out, but I remember we took a rafting trip and we talked all the way there. And she said, some couples just argue. Like I know this couple and they always argue, but they always make up. And I thought, well, maybe that's going to be me, but I didn't really want that. But I felt like there were these constant little nitpicky arguments. He was very critical of me. Like I said, I couldn't talk about my feelings very easily. anything that had to do with like maybe him feeling criticized would get shut down. So I proceeded forward and we ended up getting married. I remember I asked my dad a little before I got married. I said, Dad, I think I'm going to marry this guy. Like, what do you think? Like, do you think I should? Do you think maybe it was way before, maybe it was the summer before, I don't remember, but I asked my dad about this guy and he's like, well, I guess you should do what you decide to do. So I don't know if I was hoping my dad would say, you know what, I don't think so, but I didn't get that. I don't think he wanted to meddle, but I wish he would have. I don't want to put that on anybody, but I wish somebody would have said stop. And I hid a lot from people. I hid a lot from everybody. I didn't want them to know how I was criticized, or I don't even realize at the time, I don't think I realized that I was doing that. I was keeping everything very close. And from the very start, we got married. I remember I had my veil pinned real tight to my head, so it wouldn't shift. Somebody pinned it, I didn't. And it hurt. When people would give me a hug, like it would pull down and it would just dig, the pins would dig into my scalp and I would grimace. And I remember him looking at me saying, stop making that face. Why are you making that face? You look mad. I said, I'm just in pain. And I felt defensive about feeling like I couldn't, like, I felt bad. I'm telling you this and I'm like, gosh, I was so ungrateful and everyone was saying congratulations and I was complaining about my veil, but it really hurt and I have a very sensitive scalp. And so I just remember him like, oh, why are you making that face? And so he was already nitpicking me, even at a reception or at our honeymoon, he screamed at me. And of course it was uncomfortable. I remember I was a virgin bride. It was awkward. I was scared and I thought everything would be perfect and it was not. And I remember he humiliated me in the hotel. We were just walking through the lobby and he started yelling at me in front of people, yelling in public. And I just wanted to crawl somewhere under something. I don't remember exactly what it had to do with sex though. I mean, it was just not something you should be yelling at somebody about in the middle of other people. Anyway, I started to recognize his facial movements. I've heard that there's something called micro expressions, like when you can tell someone's lying. He had micro expressions that would alert me to when he was going to rage at me, because the rage did escalate after we got married. So before, when he would like yell, this word, you don't know this word, then he started calling me names. But I could see it ramping up by just like a tightening of his mouth. And when I saw that tightening of his mouth, I was like, oh, we're in for it. He's about to, start getting mad at me. And I just remember him full on just screaming in my face, spit flying, calling me so many terrible insults. I can't even tell you what he was mad about, what triggered it. Probably me talking about some sort of feelings or something I wanted. And I just remember going into the kitchen and just feeling like, is this my life? This can't be real. This can't be true. Like, this cannot be happening to me. This is not me. I am not this person who's having this man totally demean her, almost feeling like he's going to hit me, and just thinking, what have I done? Like, it was the first 6 weeks of marriage. And then he had to take a trip for business and he invited me to come, and he was so apologetic. And he was like, I'm so sorry. Please, I want you come up here with me. Let me treat you better. And so I went, and things were really nice. But that was our cycle. I would read his micro expressions because I would say, hey, this bill is due today. I was trying to get his credit card debt under control because I thought, now that I'm here, I'll like help him pay on time. But then I found out he doesn't want to pay that. He doesn't want to pay that. So anytime I would say, hey, this is due, he would say, there were like these words he would say, like inopportune. You're so inappropriate. It's hard to translate the words, but it's like, you're so out of order. You're so inadequate. You want to do all these things at this time. Read the room. Why would you tell me this right now? And this was a pattern of behavior around money. If I ever said, we need to make this payment, or we need to do this, or look, this bill is coming up, don't talk to me about it when I'm on my way out to work. And of course I had to make him breakfast and have everything the way that he wanted it. I had to cook the eggs the way his mom cooked them. Like, he even told me the eggs are too big. Like, the physical pieces of the egg, that's not how we do it. You need to make those smaller. Okay. So I would like make the toast the way he wanted, make the eggs the way he wanted, cook the meals the way he wanted. And at that point I wasn't working, but he wanted me to get a job too. But I couldn't talk to him about money during breakfast. That we don't do that. So then I would like think, okay, maybe I'm just going to let this go because there's no time I can talk about this. I couldn't talk about my emotions. I couldn't talk about much of anything. I think I just walked around on eggshells, trying not to anger him, trying not to say anything that would bother him. I guess I started to follow it. We just started to fall into a pattern.
So things have really started to fall into a pattern. And other things that started to happen, as you told me, and I'll go through these right now. So reckless driving would happen, and when he was angry, when you wanted to talk about something or something that he didn't like was going on, he started to act like he was going to drive off the road or into incoming traffic just to scare you. So all this questioning of things would stop. And you also told me that he would complain all the time about regular household things you did and was just a very negative person in this way. And this would make you start to doubt yourself, doubt who you were. He would also not pay attention to you by shutting his eyes when you were talking. And then when it came to physical autonomy, he would drag you when you were walking with him. He'd start walking fast and start dragging you so you would stumble. And then he'd yank your arm, telling you where to stand as well. And then weird things you told me started happening where he would pee on the floor, and that became a habit where he wouldn't even clean it up. And you would have to do it. And that is pretty dehumanizing right there, making you do something like that. Isolating things would occur as well when he would badmouth your friends, encouraging you not to be friends with a specific friend who was a strong woman friend of yours. So he's trying to isolate you as well during this time, keep you away from people of influence. And then the last thing I'll mention here is that you told me that he would get upset if your facial expressions were not up to what he wanted them to be. So if he was excited and your facial expression did not match his excitement, or if he was sad and your facial expression was not matching how he felt, there would be hell to pay. So this is a lot of different types of abuses that are going on here already, and it's really a lot. So this is where you then go to seek help from the church pastor. So what happens from here?
And the counselor listened to us a little bit, but I didn't say everything that was going on, that I was getting raged at, that I was getting called whore and terrible words, like all the cuss words. I didn't say that. I just said, there's a lot of tension. And the guy that counseled us said, well, I think you were overprotected as a child and he was underprotected. And you two your traumas are knocking into each other, and you need to cry less and you need to be less stern with her. You need to be more loving towards her and you need to be less emotional. And so we're like, oh, okay, maybe that solves it. It did not. But we just grew into these patterns of me trying not to displease him, me watching his mouth, watching his expressions. And during this time, he got braces. And I freaked out because I remember I was watching his mouth and I could not recognize his mouth because it made his lips poke out. And I was terrified. Like I can even feel the way I felt, like this stress in my chest of, oh no, I don't know if he's angry or if he's happy, if he's about to rage at me. And even so, in this first few years of marriage, I wasn't getting divorced. I was pushing through. Divorce is not biblical. Even from the pulpit, I would hear like, there's no biblical divorce. That is a sin. You are not doing that. So, I wasn't even trying to think about that. Even though sometimes I would throw it at him in an argument, I would say, I'm going to leave. But I didn't mean it because I knew that I could not ever do that. That would be totally against my faith. But I began to have like just a deep unhappiness. And when he was displeased with me, there would be a silence, like a cold silence or a displeased air. So at some point I did work a little bit before I had kids. I was a teacher there. I taught English, but a little before I had a job, when I was still like, here's the breakfast and you're going to work. If he would leave and he was mad at whatever I had done that day, I would not wait like 20 minutes to call him and say, hey, I'm so sorry. Everything's okay, right? Everything's okay. I needed to feel comforted that everything was okay, because the feeling in my body of him leaving, angry, it was almost like, I can't even describe it. It was so bad. I just wanted to do anything to have relief from it. And so I would call him and say, I'm so sorry. Like, it's going to be a good day. You got this. Let's go. Denying everything, that every insult he had told me, every humiliation, everything he had just done to me made me feel, I just wanted to feel better. And of course, he was going to make me feel better when he was like, oh, yeah, don't worry, no worries. And a lot of times he would even be like, it wasn't that big a deal. Like, get over it, and I would be like, oh, everything's fine.
So at this point, you're stuck because you have this religious belief that it says to you, stick this out until it gets really bad. A myriad of things are going on where you are not going to win. And even if you try to win, you're not going to win. Even if you are right, which you are right, you're not going to win. So this is a no-win situation that you are in, and you are isolated. The only person you're allowed really to talk to about this was the church pastor, and they have pretty much ignored the reality of what is going on. So you're in a hole with no one really to discuss things with, and there's shame that is going on too. And now you're in a survival mode. You're in a war, and there are no reinforcements that are going to be coming for you. So you're going to be doing the best you can to survive out there. So this is where you are at this point. And you're not even at your first anniversary yet. So tell us what starts to happen here once your first anniversary hits.
A lot of times I was just feeling exhausted. Like you said, I was in survival mode, but I also felt like physically exhausted. And he would be like, why are you so tired all the time? Like, what is your problem? We went on this big trip. And during this time, we went on a few different vacations. Even in our first year of marriage, it was like there were some fun things happening, even though all the vacations we argued, or he was a jerk. But this was a big trip. We went, and I remember we were passing some major important monuments, and I was dozing off, and I felt so bad. I felt like such a jerk that I could not keep my eyes open. I was exhausted. And he was like, something is physically wrong with you. What is the matter with you? You can't even keep your eyes open for this, the first time you've ever been to this big city. It's such a big deal. Why are you dozing off? And I felt like so bad. I felt like so guilty that what's wrong with me, And then after that trip, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease that causes extreme exhaustion, which also happens to a lot of people that live through abuse, which I didn't know at the time. But, this is something I still have to this day, but I believe it developed during this time of extreme traumatic stress in my body. So then there was like, okay, I have a reason, but he didn't give me any kind of compassion anyway. He still was like, would criticize me. There was always a criticism of my rest. There was always a resentment of my rest. So if he was around, or whenever he would show up and I was resting or doing something I enjoyed, I would have to hop up and look like I was doing something productive. Because if not, he would get ragey at me. He would be like, what are you doing? You just sit here all day long. You don't do anything. So there was always like, I couldn't rest. I couldn't just be calm. I had to be doing something when he was around. He would take these little trips for business, like day trips, and he would leave me a list of things to do that was so much that I could not complete during the time he was out of the city. And I was like, why does he do that the day that I have without him, the day that I have to enjoy without him? Because it would be like a relief for him not to be around that day. And he wanted me working. He wanted me doing things. So also there was like an aspect of our relationship that I think permeated throughout. It was, he hated the US, but he was proud of his American wife. He criticized, but yet this was like, I was like kind of like a trophy in that when he wanted it to elevate him, it elevated him. Like he would like speak English with me in front of his people around him, and I would speak back and they would be like, oh, he speaks English. He was getting like that recognition from me. He wanted me to change my appearance. He wanted me to dye my hair lighter, to look more white, I guess, more blonde, more typical, whatever his ideal idea was. And he looked at me kind of like elevated him in a way, but I had to be silent. So we would go to social engagements and he would hit me under the table. He would always sit next to me and kind of tap my leg under the table or punch my leg or kick me to say, be quiet. You're saying something out of order. You're not supposed to speak here. You're supposed to be quiet. That's wrong. That's inopportune what you're saying. And of course he would criticize my accent. He would criticize my ability to speak the language. He would criticize my communication. It was constantly criticized. So my personality, like I said before, I'm outgoing. I like to make friends. I like to talk to people. I like to ask people lots of questions and to learn about them. And he would like stifle that. So I would just have to sit and listen. And, we had trouble getting pregnant. I was finally able to get pregnant. And then I knew I couldn't leave. If I had thought that I was going to leave before, then I was like, okay, now we're forming a family. Like, thank God I'm going to have a baby. I'm so excited. Maybe things will get better. Maybe he'll see what it's like to be a dad and he'll be able to be the dad that he didn't get to have. So I finally, had my first son. I loved being a mom. I really did. I threw myself into the role. It was exhausting, but I was isolated. I didn't have a lot of friends. I had like one friend, I think, or two and they had babies the same age. So I would get together with them every once in a while, but mostly I was criticized because even in the very beginning, I didn't take enough pictures of him with his kids, with his baby. Like he was like, I take all the pictures and I'm like, I'm recovering from giving birth. I had a C-section. I'm in bed. I'm just holding my baby all day long. And you're mad because I'm not taking pictures of you with your son. And that was something he would always complain about over our whole marriage is I'm not in enough pictures. But I was always doing everything that I didn't have time to grab a camera. I was with my kids. So my first son was born. I was just exhausted, but I was trying to hold everything together. I was in love with my baby. I held him all day long. I was happy in that sense, but I just remember the dynamics continued and he wasn't helpful. He didn't really step up and do a lot. Like I could count on two hands how many diapers he changed over the course of our kids' lives. I mean, it wasn't a lot. If I had a friend visiting one time, a friend that I had met during my time as a missionary, she was coming to visit and he said, when my son was a baby, he's like, as long as you put him to sleep first, you can go hang out with her. Otherwise, no. Like he was always trying to like decide when I was allowed to have any free time. So he also complained a lot that I wasn't spending enough time with him intimately, that I was neglecting him. During this time, I would not be surprised if he cheated on me, but I was oblivious. I was so tired and I was just like trying to keep my head above water. Taking care of a newborn. But I felt like he would I want to say this because I think some people might have experienced this. Like if he wanted to have sex, it was like, he wants to have sex and it doesn't matter how you feel. I remember we had gone shopping. It was very hot. I was like feeling uncomfortable. We came home and I said, can you just let me cool off? I'm feeling too hot. And he completely disregarded how I was feeling. And sometimes we would be in the car and he would like reach over to touch me and I would flinch. And it's so interesting because I would feel guilty about that. And I think it's because my body knew more than my mind. And he would be like, how dare you flinch? How dare you turn away from me? How dare you not want me to touch you? Like, you're rejecting me. And I think that I was he never just wanted to like show me physical affection to where he would give me a hug or comfort me when I was sick or feeling bad. He was never like trying to be kind to me. It was always just kind of groping me if he ever touched me. And so I would flinch away from him a lot.
So the abuses are continuing, different things are showing up, and to survive, you really start to throw yourself into being a mom and being there for your two kids. And he thinks he is a good dad, but in reality, he is actually harming them. So what happens from here?
As I grew up, I threw myself into their lives, like into their activities, being that mom that drives them to their activities. I mean, really, I was a good mom. I've gone through enough therapy to be able to say I was a good mom to my boys because, there's a lot of guilt in staying with somebody like this, so much guilt. But I was a good mom. Like, I played with them, I spent time with them, I read to them, I like did the things I enjoyed and they enjoyed. We were good together. But every time he would come home, I could even tell in my sons, like, they would like, okay, everyone needs to be doing something. We're messing around right now. We need to like not be messing around. We need to be on task. He considered himself an amazing dad, but of course, there was a dynamic in our family. One child was a scapegoat, one child was the golden child, and he was a great dad to the golden child, and he was a real jerk to the other one. And unfortunately, we're still dealing with the effects of that in my son's lives. But yeah, there was definitely this dynamic to where my boys learned really early on that their dad is a star. We would sit down for breakfast together, and he would hold court, and he would talk and say all these grand ideas he had and talk about all his plans. And we all just had to kind of listen. No interrupting, no, but what about this? No interchange of ideas. It was all this monologue. And whenever my boys would try to share, especially the scapegoat son, his dad could not listen for more than 30 seconds without interrupting. And that became a source of so much tension that I could tell my son just felt like so rejected because he could never share what he liked. And because my golden child son plays a sport that my ex played, he was always receiving all that great attention and affirmation. But even so, during the sports activities, I'll just say soccer, during the soccer games, he would constantly yell anyway, like, no, you're doing this wrong. You're doing this wrong. And he would stand beside me. His dad would stand beside me and say, he should have done that. Let me show you. He should have done that. He did that wrong. He did that wrong. To the point that I wasn't sure if my son was even that good at his sport or not, because I was like, there's so much criticism and other people are telling me he's really good, but I can't tell because there's just constant criticism. Like, there's no, hey, that was great. The end of the story, So my children were growing up. There were a few times when things got really tense. There were times when he would be physically abusive to where he would like kick in a cupboard door, throw something, break something. One time he was yelling at me and he grabbed me and held me down on the couch and just like shoved me down to where it was on a soft surface, but he was like abusive, but he wasn't like slapping me, punching me. There were things like that happening to where at some point, I know I wrote in a journal and I had forgotten until much later, but I had written that I told him, maybe even when they were really little, my boys, that I wanted to leave, that I couldn't do this anymore. And so even with all the stress of like, this is going to be bad, I don't know how I'm going to support myself, I'm going to be ostracized from my church, I'm leaving. And I remember he said, you're a foreigner. No judge is going to give a terrible mom like you those boys. You can leave, but you got to leave them here. And I remember thinking, I will not leave them. And I was so afraid and I didn't know who to talk to. And so I didn't follow through. And I have a few different journal entries where when I was getting ready to leave, I looked back and I could see that there were moments, breaking points, where I would be like, this person is this and this. Like, he breaks everything. He screams at me. He's a rageaholic. And then I would say, God, help me forgive him. And I would write out these prayers. God, help me forgive. Let's have a clean slate. Like, I was always doing the work of, I'm going to forgive. I'm going to try harder. I'm going to do all the tips. I'm going to love him better. I'm going to serve him the foods he likes. I'm going to do better. But I was already doing everything and I couldn't be perfect. And that's what happens when you walk on eggshells with somebody and you like get it right this time. You don't know that the next step is going to get it wrong, because like last week you went that same direction and everything was fine, but this week it bothered him. Like, there's no way to keep that person happy. But I didn't realize that yet. So I guess over the years it was up and down. And thankfully I did have those friends, those two close friends that became very close, and we raised our kids. They were about the same age and they both spoke English, so I could talk to them, but I never revealed what was going on because I just kind of held it close to me. And I internalized the guilt and the pressure and the feeling bad and feeling like it was me and I just had to try harder. And yes, he's being a jerk, but I should have done this and I'm going to forgive, and like the clean slate over and over. Let's have a clean slate, start over again. It'll be okay. Because he would write out apologies. And he would write out these long, like, I'm sorry. I know you are the wife that I've always wanted, and you're such a good mom, and we're going to be okay. Like, he would write out these notes to me. And if I compare these notes today, they're all the same. It's like you could have just copied the same thing over and over, because it never changed. Because I would always mess up again, because it was contingent on me being perfect for him to be kind to me. And so around 2020, so around when COVID hit and everything, he had gotten a different type of job. So he was leaving the business in the hands of someone else, and he was working for the government. I remember I had been dealing with eating disorder my whole marriage. And I can look back now and think I was coping, but I was feeling so uncomfortable with myself that I just wanted to start therapy and talk to somebody about it. And so I started therapy with a great therapist. We're working on like helping me figure out why I'm using these behaviors. And we found some childhood traumas that helped me like see that there were reasons I felt like I wasn't enough. Like I had things happen to me that I could heal and see like I am okay. Like who I am is enough, and who I am is good, and who I am is acceptable. And so as I started to come into the truth of like my dignity as a human being and my worthiness, I started to become more and more disillusioned in the situation of my marriage that wasn't getting better. My children were getting older. I knew that at some point they were not going to be there. And I was like, I cannot live like this for the rest of my life. Like, I'm not going to keep being treated like this. So as I worked through therapy, worked through the eating disorder, healed the eating disorder, I started telling my therapist little by little things so slowly of what my life was like. And I remember the day I sat down with my ex and I said, I am not going to grow old like this. Like, the way you treat me is not okay. I'm not going to grow old like this. I didn't call him abusive. I didn't even know, that was not on my radar yet. I just knew that I don't like the way you treat me, and I'm not going to grow old like this. He was very quiet. I remember there was a big parade that day. He had to go up to the parade because of his job. Like, it was a government holiday. And he left. And I thought, okay, I said that. The next day I said, hey, would you like to talk about what I said? He said, you hurt my feelings. I said, I hurt your feelings how? He said, yeah, what you said hurt my feelings. I said, so me telling you that you hurt me hurt your feelings. Okay. So I kind of tucked that away, and I was like, he's not going to change. But, I kept pushing forward. I mean, life has a way of life has momentum that you just have to keep going forward. Like, constant practices I'm driving people to, constant taking people to school and back. In this country, you don't get your license until you're older. So I'm still driving people around even when they're like in college, almost graduating. And I just remember I was in some different support groups. So I was healing that. I had healed that eating disorder, and I was in these support groups about why, women we're so pressured to look a certain way. And we were just kind of like learning about how we can love ourselves the way we are. It was so, so helpful. And I remember I was excited, and it was like the end of 2022 at this point. And I was telling him, my ex, we were driving to pick up one of our sons, and I was telling him about like how excited I was about this stuff I was learning about diet culture, and how like women are under this insane pressure, and how I was learning to love myself the way I was. And I was so excited. I was growing. Like, finally I was growing. And I was passionate about this. And he said, I don't like the way you're talking right now, and I don't really want to keep having this conversation. And I thought, and in that moment, there was like a snap. Like, it snapped inside me. I don't want to talk to you about anything ever again. Ever. Anything. I'm done talking to you. Because, over the years, you talk to someone, you try to share your feelings, you try to share your dreams. No space for that. Only space for their stuff. And I said, I'm done. I'm not talking to you about it ever again. And I remember my younger son got in the car and he said, is dad going at you again? And I said, yeah, kind of. And I was like, he even knows. Like, I didn't even have to say anything. He can feel the tension in the car. And that night, I remember it was right before Christmas. I looked up, how can I emotionally detach from someone without getting a divorce? Because I still, even though I told him I'm not going to grow old like this, I mean, I don't know what I was going to do, but I wasn't going to divorce him. So even then I was like, how do I emotionally detach without divorcing someone. And so I found this website that talked about hidden emotional abuse, and it was like for Christian women. And I was like, this is a thing, hidden emotional abuse. And then like I just kept searching and scrolling and reading, and I was like, this is a thing, like hidden emotional abuse. I was like, okay, he's not punching me. I didn't realize that a lot of things he did were physical abuse. But at this moment, I was like, oh my gosh, he is abusive. And so little by little, I just started like reading and learning and seeing patterns of what he was doing. And I remember on like the first day of the year in 2023, I sat down with him and I said, you are abusing me. I thought, if I can just tell him, he'll stop. He'll realize, he's abusing me. And so I said, you're abusing me. You're abusive. And he said, no, I'm not. I said, yeah. He's like, that's not abuse. I said, you've been abusive to me. You've been talking down to me. And we went back and forth, and he was like throwing stuff at me. Like, I don't know what I would do if you left. I might commit suicide. And I said, you would not. Would you do that to your own children? And then like he had been like all sad, and he was like, I don't know what I might do to myself. And then he was like, how dare you say that to me? And it was like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to yell, but it was such a switch. Like he was like, oh, woe is me. I could not imagine that you would do that to me. And then boom, like, how dare you tell me what I can't, like what I'm doing to my kids. And I was like, what is going on? Like that was also one of the first times I realized like there was a mask. Like I didn't know anything about the mask slipping or anything like that, but I saw like such a drastic switch that did not make sense, And then he threw something out at me that like kind of knocked out the wind out of my sails. He said, well, your eating situation, your eating disorder that I had just been telling him about and like expressing, trying to get support for, that I was in recovery from almost. He was like, that has really taken a toll on our marriage. And I was like, no, it hasn't. But it hit me. And I thought, oh, so we're both to blame. Because I had been feeling like, oh, maybe it's not me at all. Like I was feeling validated. Like maybe it's not actually me, because I've been trying and it's not getting better. So I went back and forth for the next few months, gathering information. I started listening to this podcast. I started hearing like all of these stories, and I just started noticing, patterns. And some days he would come home and say, I was raised by this really rough man, and because I didn't have my dad, and I'm sorry I've been so gruff with you, and I can do better. I can change. I'm going to get therapy. And he would say, but tell me exactly again, what is it that I'm doing? And I had told him over and over, like, I don't like the way you speak to me. You're controlling of me. You belittle me all the time. And he would say, okay. I'm going to find therapy, but could you give me a list of therapists? And I even asked my therapist, I said, can you give him like the name? But I had been reading this book that talked about how you don't do the work for that person. Like they need to do the work. If they're serious about changing, they have to do their own work of finding the therapist, of going to therapy. And so I had also looked at Lundy Bancroft's why does he do that? And I was trying to like just see the patterns, and I started to see them, but I still wasn't sure that I would have to leave. I thought, well, maybe he will do the work and maybe he will change. So every time he would ask me, I would say, you know what? Here's a name, but also you need to try to find somebody to talk to. And then he would come home another day and say, you know what, I realized this, and I would get like my hopes up, because leaving implicated so many things. One, I hadn't worked for so long. I wasn't really prepared to go back into the workforce in any capacity. If I wanted to teach, I didn't have a certification. Like I wasn't seeing how I was going to support myself. I didn't know what was going to happen with my kids. So it was all kind of scary. It was very daunting to think like, I know this might happen, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to. So he would give me these little glimpses of, I'm doing this. But I think that with the knowledge I gained listening to the different podcasts, reading the different books, I remember I learned about radical acceptance. And when I read about that concept of, this is the situation, are you willing to put up with it with no changes? Because if you're not, you can't bank your hopes on somebody changing. You can only change yourself. You cannot control another person. This is how that person is. If they decide to do something and change, that is completely outside of your control. And I thought, could I sit here for the rest of my life with no change? Or am I just going to accept that this is who he is? and live with this for the rest of my life. And I had to confront the fact that I was not able to do that. And so as I learned more and more things, I saw more and more patterns, and I started writing things down, patterns of our conversations. One day I was talking to him and I said, we need to do this and this. And he said, well, what about last week when you said this? And I said, well, last week is different because of this and this. It doesn't have to do with what we're talking about. And he said, why are you bringing last week into this conversation? And I said, oh, you are doing that on purpose. I like recognize the pattern of him throwing like something over here, like throwing out something to distract me from the conversation we're in. And then when I talked about that thing, he said, we're not talking about that. And I'm like, he has been doing this for 21 years, 22 years. He's been throwing all of these different topics of conversation into our conversations so that I get so confused. And I finally noticed that he was doing that. And I wrote it down. I remember one day I came home from dropping my son off at school. And he was like, he looked at me and he said, why did you take so long? I looked at the clock and I was thinking, was it later than normal? Because I took so long to answer him, he started getting so angry at me. And I just watched him and I said, you're angry because I paused. Like, you get angry because I take a second to answer you. You get angry because I make a face that you don't like. You get angry because you think I'm a bad communicator and you say that my language skills are bad and that I have a bad accent and that I don't speak correctly. Why do you get so angry? And I just remember him kind of like, I don't know, like just stopping and leaving, and of course, angry. I remember I started learning how to jade, which is don't justify, don't argue, don't defend, don't explain. So in our conversations, I would just stop. I would be quiet. I would listen to what he had to say. And he was like, you're acting differently. You're withdrawing from me. You're being cold. It's because I was not engaging with him anymore. And I remember at the very end, right before I left, we were supposed to take a trip to a really pretty place with waterfalls and a place I had never been. And I really did want to go because my kids were going to be there. We were all going to be in the same place. I didn't have to worry about anything. It wasn't like a couple's trip. I didn't have to worry about him trying to be close to me because at that point I was like, I don't want you near me. And he said, you're acting weird. I think I'm going to cancel the trip. And I said, okay. I said, okay. And I thought, I'm going to see if he really cancels it. And then he came back and he was like, okay, well, let's pack up. We're going to go. And he did. Of course, he didn't cancel it. He was just trying to get me to engage with him and to argue with him and to defend myself. And so we took that trip. And in the meantime, I had been speaking to my brother and trying to figure out where I was going to go. And I thought, well, if I could just go back to the US for the summer, if I can go up there for the summer, we can work. And then maybe I can kind of formulate a plan of what I'm going to do next. Like if I'm going to go back and if I'm going to get a job on my own and live in a different place or what I'm going to do. And so the plan started becoming clear that we could go. My brother was like, you can stay with us for the school year if you want. Like you could, because my younger son was going to be a senior. And then it kind of all worked out to where both of my kids were like, why don't we stay a little bit longer? We've never stayed there very long. We could, like, one of them was like, I could work. The other one said, I would like to see what high school is like. I could graduate from there. Like I could play soccer on a team up there. And so we started talking about that plan, and my ex, like, he agreed to buy us one-way tickets in case. He said, I'll buy you one-way tickets for the summer and you work and you buy your ticket back and then you pay me back for the tickets. Like he wasn't even paying for tickets for us to go just have a vacation, because that was, for him, money was like, don't ask me for money. And I mean, that's a whole other situation, but I was never able to get anything that I wanted. Like I was never able to just have control of money and pay for anything. And not even bills. Like I would get reprimanded for spending money on certain things, even bills, if I didn't have authorization. So, it worked out for us to go. And so once I knew that my kids were on board for a year, I knew that I was not going to go back. I knew that somehow after that year, during that year, I would tell them, you know what, not that I was trying to sneak one past you guys, but I needed out. And a couple days before we were set to fly, I just remember I had my first panic attack. And I remember I was on the phone with my mom, and I'm so thankful for her support because she just told me to breathe. And I said, I don't know if I can do this. And she talked me through it. She said, look, we're here for you. We're going to support you. You have a place to be. And my parents live in the same area. So I knew that I was going to have them. I was going to have my brother and his family. And the day we left, I remember just feeling validated because I was getting the luggage. We had to take a bus to get to the airport, and I was getting the luggage registered. And I said, do I need my paper ticket? And I remember my ex just made that face like, why are you so stupid? Like, why are you asking stupid questions? And I felt so validated. I looked at one of my sons and I said, why is he like that? Like, why is he like that? He's just so cruel to me. And then we left and we moved back to the US. It's so strange. I've heard that women take up to 7 times to leave an abusive situation because it's so hard. And I do think putting a country between you and that person is very good. It's like a good strategy. It's very hard too, though. So I remember just moving in with my brother and trying to figure out the logistics of all of these people together in one house. It was a lot. It was a lot for them. It was a lot for us. My boys, while they were excited, they got jobs right away. They started working. I started enrolling my son for high school, getting vaccines he didn't have, doing all the paperwork. I was just going through a hard transition. It was so difficult. And I just felt so guilty. I felt so guilty, like I was doing something wrong. Like, how could I do this to him? How could I leave him like that? And I remember my therapist, the same therapist I had been seeing probably around 2021. She said, we need to access your rage. So she helped me access my rage. Like the rage at having been abused for 22 years, the rage at not being able to make my own decisions, the rage at being diminished, the rage at being called names, being called crazy, being called whore, being called everything you can imagine, the rage at not feeling supported even by my own church, just rage. I needed to feel that rage. And I started to tap into that rage and it fueled me. She said, this is, you need the rage now. Sympathy, that makes you go back. Rage makes you keep going forward. So I did feel like she really helped me not allow him to pull me back in, like, because he would call me, would tell me about his job. And I mean, for years, I was his emotional wastebasket. Whatever was happening in his life, I was his cheerleader. I was his supporter. I was like, well, have you thought about this? Oh, yeah, that's great. I would like really hold on to all of those things for him and just like support him, encourage him. And during the time before I left, he told me, he was like, you used to support me. You used to be my cheerleader. You used to, like, you were my biggest fan. And I remember saying, I'm not your biggest fan anymore. Like, you treat me like garbage and I'm done. But he would still try to call me and talk to me. And he would complain that his kids weren't calling him a lot. And I would say, you know, they're busy. They're in activities. They're like working all the time. You know, and we left it at, this is a year-long thing and we'll be in touch. And he thought he was going to come visit at Christmas. And I think he knew anyway, though, because later on, a friend of mine said, you know what, I've wanted to tell you this for a really long time, but as soon as you guys left, I found your ex on all these dating apps because I was with my friend and we found him. And so even as he was telling me that, you know, I'm going to work on me and we're going to make this work and whatever, he had the idea that we were still like going to figure stuff out, but he was on dating apps or whatever. I mean, I'm sure he was doing that our whole marriage, though. I don't have proof, but I just suspect he was, because everything he said about himself was basically a lie, because he purported himself to be this Christian, God-fearing, upstanding citizen. And in public, he was like this charismatic speaker and teacher. And at home, he was calling his wife a whore and threatening to look at porn if I wouldn't have sex with him. These two things were not the same. His outward persona and the way he treated his family was who he was. The other thing was a mask. But as I moved through that year and started like communicating with him less and less, I just became stronger and stronger in my resolve that I am capable. I am strong. I remember my therapist told me, "You are so strong." And I thought, no, I'm not. I'm weak. I can't do this. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know. It took me forever to figure out. I couldn't find a job. I went through a bunch of interviews. I took some courses online to like make myself more marketable, and nobody was hiring me. And I was feeling like not strong. And she said, "You are so strong. You've done this. You've come back. You have support of your family, but you're doing this. You're strong." And now I look back and I think, gosh, I am strong. Like I can see that, he had made me feel so small, so stupid a lot of the time that I wasn't good at communicating. Like he would always criticize my language ability. And I had to take an exam in the language that I had been so terrible at, according to my ex. And I got such a high rating from the professor when I took the exam. And he said, "How is your language so good? How are you so skilled in this language? You have a very excellent level. Like you are a great candidate for our program. Welcome." And they even gave me a job because I was so good in the language that I had studied and that I had been speaking for years. And I had been told I was a terrible communicator and that I was bad. So I received that validation. I went back to school and I also had a job through the school. So things started to get better. I mean, there were a lot of stressors during that year. And I think that I look back and I see like we didn't have our own space, my boys and I. They didn't really get everything that was going on under the surface. At sometime before Christmas, I had to sit them down and tell them I wasn't going to go back. And that was just devastating. My older son was devastated. He said, "How is this possible? Like, how could you give up on our family?" And I said, "I just can't take the abuse anymore." And I didn't call it abuse. I said, "Your dad is not very kind to me. And I don't know if you noticed that, or I don't know if you can really see it." And he got so upset. And it was a very hard time for my boys. That's the one thing I really do wish I could change, because my boys suffered so much, the loss of their family, but I just think they suffered so much from the treatment of their father their whole lives. And I think back to when I was that young mom, and I think I wish I had found a way out then. I wish I could have raised them apart, like at least partly in a home that was not so critical of them, not so harsh. That was a hard year for us. And I have worked through a lot of regret. That's how I can still say I'm a good mom. I know I am. And I know I was doing the best I could. I was also going through an extremely emotional time of like standing on my own 2 feet and breaking out of a trauma bond with this person of 22 years that I was married, and learning to, or remembering who I am. I remembering that I'm a strong, independent, smart, and capable person. That I have an actual personality, that I don't have to be quiet and get smacked under the table because I don't have anything interesting to say, or I'm going to make people uncomfortable with what I say. I'm not. I have good friends. People like me. I'm a likable person. I'm a kind person. I'm great with people's emotions. I can sit with people's emotions. I'm empathetic. I'm fun. And I had to go back and learn those things. I learned those things through my classmates in online school. I made great friends online. I made friends over a video camera over that year. And then at the end of the year, it was time for me to move. And I moved into my own place with the help of my parents. And I got a job. My younger son got a scholarship to go to college. And my older son decided to move back in with his dad. And that was really hard too, just like facing being alone. And there was a lot of grieving that second year I was back because I was on my own. I was like an empty nester and my family had fallen apart in a way. And I did have to grieve that loss, but I kept building up and courage, and I kept growing, and I got a job and finding that I'm a really good teacher. And I really care about my students. And I feel like I found my vocation. I feel like I don't know if you've ever heard of Ikigai. I took a class on Ikigai. It's like your vocation, like your calling, your chosen profession, kind of when it all kind of comes together. And it was almost like I kind of remade myself, like at 49. Like I graduated with 2 master's degrees when right after or the same year I was turning 50. It all happened. Now I'm 51 and I've been teaching at this school a couple years, and every day I feel like so happy to be alive. I feel so much peace in my home. I know that no one's going to come in here and yell at me, that I'm going to be able to make good choices with the money that I earn, that I am capable. I have to speak the language every single day that I learned, and I'm really good at it. And native speakers are always complimenting me, and I'm a great communicator. And I just feel so proud of myself because of how far I've come. And I look back and sometimes, you know how your photo apps will like show you on this day 7 years ago, and I look back and I think she had no idea what was going to hit her. But it's so much better than I could see. I remember right when I had decided, and I was talking to a friend and I was like, I have to leave. And I remember we were walking around on a soccer field and I was looking across the field and I was telling her, it seems like such a far distance that I have to travel. And I just wish it could be next summer. And I wish it could be, I wish I could be on the other side of this or whatever. And she said, the only way there is through. And I said, yeah, I've got to walk each step of the way. And I just feel like I did that. And my feet were strong enough and my body was strong enough. And I pushed through and I've grown, and I would not trade the person I am today for anything, because I have hopes and dreams. I had become a person with no dreams. I had become a person with no future. And now I have a future. And I am capable to walk by myself. And yeah, there's lots of things going on with one of my sons. Like he's still really struggling from all the trauma that he's lived, being the scapegoat. I mean, that I do not know what that's like. He asked me one day, he said, do you know what it's like to have a father that doesn't unconditionally love you? And I said, I don't. And I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. And I wish I could change that. But at the same time, I'm so thankful I got out. And I'm here and I'm going to live another day, and I'm going to write new stories and see new chapters. Sorry, I'm done talking.
And if you had any words of wisdom for everyone listening, what would they be?
I think that you've got to write things down. When you start to recognize that, from listening to podcasts or reading books or whatever, you need to write things down so you can go back and remember, because your brain kind of falls out in these discussions and they're so circular and so confusing that you can't remember what was said. So you need to write stuff down and remember and so you can start to recognize the patterns. When you are ready to leave, you need to find safe people that will validate what is going on with you. That are not going to say, oh, is it really that bad? No, you need someone that says, oh, that's bad. I had no idea. Because that's what the safe people told me. We had no idea. I really hid it so well because I was protecting him. And those safe people believe your story. And I think you do have to have a plan. I mean, I think a lot of women leave and come back because they maybe just leave on a whim or they're trying to get out. And a lot of times you just have to leave because of violence. But if you're able to make a plan, have a plan in place for you to get out. And also get therapy. I think my therapist, I told her recently, I'm going to be working with you for a while. And she's like, that's okay. I like working with you. I said, we're going to be together for a long time. And take one step at a time, one day at a time. You're not going to see all the steps. You're not going to see the future. We never see the future, but you might see the next step. So take that next step and keep moving forward. And I just want to say that freedom is possible. Freedom is amazing. Having a nervous system that is calm has taken a while to rebuild because of all the trauma. But it is so nice to just, I don't know, I just like to take long walks and just feel the freedom of knowing that no one is asking me where I am, why I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, why am I resting or whatever I'm doing. I'm doing what I enjoy, and that is possible. There is hope. And yes, you are strong enough, even if you don't feel strong enough, because in these relationships, we become a shell of ourselves. We become annihilated as human beings. We become squashed, and you will come back to yourself. I mean, it takes time. but you can come back to the person that you are. And that person is amazing. And that person is worthy of love. You're worthy of respect. You're worthy of being treated in a good way and with kindness.
Well, Barb, I really want to thank you for being here today. You were in survival mode for 22 years. That's a long time to be absorbing this amount of abuse. It's exhausting, and I know that adjective really doesn't do it justice. You've just been holding things together for way too long, and hopefully you get the peace you really, really deserve now. And I know this is a consolation prize of everything, but you really did a great job today, and you changed a lot of people's lives by telling your story today and helping them. And you're just a wonderful person. Everyone here today could hear that in your voice. And I'm just happy you were here to share your story, because you did just a really fantastic job. You put out those little details. You wanted people to hear those details. You did a great job today, and I really can't thank you enough for being here and sharing your story today.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad I could be here.
Well, thank you, Barb, once again for being here. And if you want to be a guest like Barb was today, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com. Fill out our guest form and press the submit button. We'll go from there. Also at our website, we have a support group with Zoom meetings every Wednesday nights, Thursday afternoons, and Saturday nights. We also have forum boards for you to post on to get the validation you need from survivors just like you. So join our support group today. And we also have a newsletter at our website where you get a free reflection workbook for every new survivor story. And that is a weekly newsletter, all at narcissistapocalypse.com. And that is it for today's episode, today's survivor story. So for myself and Barb, we hope you have a good night.